Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
You will hear adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And the Paranormal with Jason.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. Oh, and you just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Halloween. I quote from The Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. A person should always choose a costume which is in direct contrast to their own personality. Words to live by.
Far to the south, hidden in the mysterious low country of Cuba, a sugar plantation house, dimly lighted in the somber dusk. In the parlor of the house sits a small, thin woman.
Lester Lockwood was my brother, Inspector. His wife, Nydia, drove him to throw himself off the riverbank.
Suppose you tell me the whole story.
Well, 2 years ago, my brother and his wife left their professorships in the English department at Lynbrook College and came here to live and write. As time went by, Nydia became fascinated by the native drums. One night, she wandered alone in the jungle.
And never came back, yes, I remember.
And then the first of those mysterious notes appeared, written in blood on dried bark. I have been chosen, it said, for one of the living dead. Come to me, Lester, and share my eternity. It was signed, Nydia. Lester watched for her, certain somehow she'd come for him. And last night, we were standing on the jungle path.
Judith, the drums. They're getting louder. She will come, I know she will.
Oh, Lester, give up this plantation. It's evil.
It's too late. She's here. Listen. Do you hear that?
What?
A movement. Yonder beyond the trees. Look.
Oh, Lester. It is Nydia.
It's true. Judith, my wife's one of the living dead.
Lester, come back.
I've got to find her and save her from this voodoo magic.
He ran off in the darkness, and I went quickly back to the house to wait. And at last, Lester came back.
I couldn't find her. I looked everywhere.
Then you've got to come away from this place tonight.
Judith, look, here on the window ledge.
Oh, another of those terrible notes. What does it say?
You are a human. You cannot know the glory of eternal life. Come to the jungle, to the drums, and share my living death. Keep this between you and I.
Oh, she's trying to destroy you. Trying to, Lester.
I'm going to her, Judith.
No.
Lydia's waiting for me to come.
Lester, come back. Come back.
And this is the note your brother found last night on the window ledge, Miss Lockwood. Eh?
Yes. Others, I suppose he destroyed them.
I see. And you say your brother's wife was formerly an English instructor?
At Lynbrook. She met Lester there.
Your story, Miss Lockwood, is interesting, and I think I know the truth. But the chief at headquarters would rather hear it from you, so come along.
What was the clue that led Inspector James to arrest Judith Lockwood? In a moment, he'll tell us, but first...
Did he actually arrest her? I think he just asked her to come downtown. The odd thing here is, we really don't know what happened and if her brother is even really dead, or undead as the case may be. I think that this whole thing is shrouded in mystery, and not really the good kind. We really don't have a choice, but let's head back and hear the rest of this.
And now, here's Inspector James.
Under questioning, Judith Lockwood broke down and confessed to the murder of her brother and his wife. She was a pretty mixed-up woman, but she had imagination. I knew Judith had written the note herself because no instructor of the English language is going to make 2 grammatical errors in 4 short sentences. You don't say human for human being. And nothing is ever between you and I. So, if you didn't know, let's keep it between you and me.
Okay, that has to be the worst yet. I may not know a lot about being a zombie, but this I do know. Your cognitive thoughts are limited, and I think grammatical errors are to be expected. This 5-minute non-mystery was brought to you by Halloween and the Great Pumpkin.
What's that you say?
Welcome to the podcast. On the program today, we have so much stuff. 7 different segments today with 4 ghost stories from you guys. Truly amazing. Our featured story comes from the pen of Virginia Woolf, and then we'll play another game of True and False with Johnny, Is It True? The Halloween edition. Berklie Apedaile, a listener from Smithfield, Utah, has written a Halloween story for us, and it's read by Mark Nelson. I am very excited about this one. We end the show with not so important times in history that sheds a little bit of light on the vampires of New England. But before we get to any of that, I want to talk a bit about next week's show. Sylvia Schultz will be with us for the finale of the month of Spooky with a special game show edition of Ron's Amazing Stories. Also, Sylvia will be telling us about a new contest to promote her new book. First prize is a free copy of that very same book. So what do you say we get started with the spookiness? Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to right now? Halloween mysteries, skin-crawling horror stories that actually happened on Halloween. It was written by Roger Mills and narrated by Bill Conway. Here's the introduction to the book.
There are those who call Halloween the devil's holiday and claim that rather than being a day for innocent, scary fun, Halloween is actually a celebration of evil. Halloween, or All Hallows' Eve, is traditionally the night before All Saints' Day, a Christian festival, but Halloween has older, darker roots in Celtic and Druidic tradition. Halloween is also the eve of the Druidic festival of Samhain, a time when the barriers between the natural and supernatural worlds were at their most fragile, and when the dead could return and entities from other dimensions could visit the human realm. Many of our Halloween traditions actually come from these much older beliefs. For example, the wearing of masks and disguises on Halloween is a very ancient practice intended to confuse wandering ghosts and spirits. Of course, we laugh at these superstitions now. We know that Halloween is a time for having fun, and that there isn't any such thing as a night that is evil. Or is there? If you read the stories in this book, you may begin to wonder. These are all true stories of strange and bad things that have happened on Halloween. So many stories of so many bad things that you may start to wonder whether perhaps there is something different about Halloween. Something dark. Perhaps even something evil. You won't find any stories of ghosts or spirits or the supernatural here. These are stories of real people and the strange and wicked things that they do on or around October 31st. Read on, if you dare, and discover a feast of murder, untimely death, and mysterious disappearance linked by just one thing: Halloween.
This is not your typical ghost story fare. In fact, it is a true crime novel at its best. The stories include Trick or Treat or Die, Framed for a Halloween Murder, Pocahontas is Missing, The Pastor of Death, Death Came in a Fancy Dress, The Great Cornell Pumpkin Prank, and many more. The author of the book, Roger Mills, is a non-fiction writer that enjoys tales about our world's conspiracy theories, true paranormal stories, and of course, ghost stories. Over the years, it has amazed him as to how many unexplained mysteries there are in history. This book contains several stories that have happened on Halloween's past, and you can have his book today. Here's what Audible has set up for us. Audible is offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can get Halloween mysteries, skin-crawling horror stories that actually happened on Halloween. Thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
I am constantly amazed by what people have experienced. Our first story just might be one of the strangest we've had to date on this show. It comes from Portland, Maine, and was sent in by Parker Happ. Hello, Ron. This is the first time I'm telling this story outside the family circle. My wife encouraged me to write it up and send it in to you. We both loved the show and wanted to do our part for the month of spooky. Maine is famous for its rich wildlife and quaint seaside towns. It's known for its seafood, scenic coast, and charming lighthouses. However, the state also has a dark side. We have urban legends, charming haunted lighthouses, and really freaky ghost stories. It's easy to see why every Stephen King novel takes place here. There is dark woods, abandoned cemeteries, dangerous roads, and hundreds of unexplained deaths. There's even haunted pianos, lake monsters, and curses which have all stood the test of time. Maine is without a doubt one of the most haunted places in the world today. My story is tied to this history, and I call it the Seguin Island Horror. Seguin Island is one of the oldest lighthouses in Maine, standing high above sea level on an isolated and barren rock. It is said to be haunted by a ghost of a former caretaker and his wife, who were driven insane by the isolation. The caretaker came to the island with his wife and had a piano brought there to ease the monotony. Unfortunately, she could only play the piano if she had sheet music. No creative ability, I guess. To make matters worse, she had only the one song, and she played that tune over and over until her husband took the piano apart with an axe and then turned the axe on his one-song wife. It's said that people have seen their ghosts and can still hear the piano playing to this day. My wife and I love to visit White Houses and decided to return to one of our favorites. If you can't guess it, it is, in fact, the Seguin Island Light Station. The area around the place is full of beautiful vistas, wonderful hiking, and it's only 30 miles from Portland. We have been there many times, hoping to catch a glimpse of the ghost or maybe hear that piano playing. The lighthouse stands at the highest point on the tiny island with nothing around it but cold rushing water of the Kennebec River. It can only be reached by charter boat and appointment. We had both. We also made special arrangements to stay longer, so when the ferry left, we were virtually left alone on the island except for the support staff. We always like to begin our trip with a stroll around the island and then go into the main house. It is here that the ghost activity has been seen and heard. It was getting along toward dusk, and we would have to be leaving soon with the support staff on their boat. They were busy closing things up for the day, so that left us completely alone in the house. We sat down at the piano. My wife said, "Are you there?" As she spoke, I felt a chill go through my body, and then a hand on my shoulder. I turned, and there was nothing there. My wife spoke again. "I can feel your presence. Please play something for us." A single note rang out from the piano. Neither I nor my wife were touching any of the keys. Again a chill and a second touch. It was creepy. Suddenly things turned violent. I felt a shove in the middle of my back, and my wife let out a scream. She stood straight up and whirled around, swatting at the air. I ran to her, and she threw her arms around me. We got out of that room and went to wait for the boat. On the way home, we told the support staff what had happened. Each and every one of them had their own creepy story about things that had happened to them in that old lighthouse. As for my wife, she told us that she saw lights all around her, swarming like bees. She felt like they meant to harm her. One of the cashiers said that she too had experienced those very same lights. We have not been back to the light station since, but plan to someday. Parker Happ, Portland, Maine. Parker, that is a story. So very strange and very well told. Thank you for it. I did a little research on the place. The Seguin Island Lighthouse is in the Gulf of Maine near the mouth of the Kennebec River. It was established in 1795 and is the second oldest of Maine's coastal lighthouses. Its height is at 180 feet above mean sea level. The present tower was built in 1857 and is the highest of the state's lighthouses. It became automated in 1985. It is now operated as a museum property by a non-profit organization and is open to the public via scheduled ferry from Popham Beach. The light is currently deactivated due to an issue with an undersea cable that powers the island. As for the ghost of the island, there are literally hundreds of reports and sightings and sounds. In fact, the place is called Maine's most haunted location. To this day, visitors to the isolated island have reported hearing the haunting sound of piano music drifting softly from the lighthouse to the ghostly vestige of her husband trudging across the island, axe in hand. Thank you for your story, Parker. Our second story also comes from Maine. Another of the most haunted places there is said to be a stretch of road in the north called Route 2A. It runs through the Haynesville woods and is known for tragic and bizarre accidents. It is also famously known for a woman who can be seen walking on the side of the road. Here is a story from Margie Wells, who had this encounter on Route 2A. She calls her story The Ghost Bride of Haynesville Road. I was driving home and had to go through Haynesville. I always feel strange about driving that stretch of road, but nothing weird has ever happened. Of course, I knew of its history, but I always thought it was a bunch of bunk. That is, until that night. It was dark, and I saw a woman walking the side of the road. She was dressed in white head to toe, and saying that she looked out of place, well, that's an understatement. I slowed to a stop, rolled down the window, and asked if she needed any help. She told me that she was a new bride, and that her and her husband had been in a car accident, and that they needed help. I told her that I would gladly help, and told her to get in. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. As she moved towards the door, I felt a ghostly chill, and then she was gone. That's it. That's the end of the story. Nothing else happened. I drove home and told my roommate about it, but he just laughed and said that he too had heard the strange stories. Margie Wells, Bancroft, Maine. Well, Margie, I don't have an explanation for that one. A simple scary haunting of the Haynesville forest, I guess. Thank you for sharing it with us. It truly is amazing. This next story is a short one from Priscilla Lovell, who sends this one in from her hometown of Casper, Wyoming. Hello, Ron. I've had 3 weird encounters in my life. This is one of them. It's easy for me to claim it's true, but few believe it. However, this is how I remember it, and we all saw the same thing. I call my story Late Night Orb. When I was 15 years old, I still shared a room with my younger sister. She would have been 13. Not a lot of privacy, but you get used to it. My bed was perpendicular to hers, about 3 yards away. One night I woke about 3 a.m. and I saw a strange blue glowing ball. It looked like a birthday sparkler, creating a spherical halo of embers, but it burned blue instead of white. It was just floating there above my head. Knowing my sister was just a few feet away, I called out, "Pat, hey Pat, do you see that?" The way she answered, and the tremble in her voice, really freaked me out. "Yeah, what is that?" Then there was nothing. We just woke up the next morning, got up, normal day, didn't feel off in any way, except that we both still remembered the strange glowing thing. Our bedroom was in the basement, so I started walking upstairs. The basement stairs lead into the kitchen and dining room, and I could hear my parents speaking. I could tell they were intentionally being vague, a little hushed, coded language, if you will, but it was clear that they were talking about a glowing thing they had seen during the night. I raced upstairs, kind of excited that they'd seen it too, and told them what Pat and I had seen. My folks dismissed it. My mom even got a little upset and said that we simply overheard her conversation, and that we were trying to scare her. But I wasn't. We weren't. My sister and I had seen that same blue glowing ball. The next night, Pat and I set up a Polaroid camera so that we could get proof. Nothing happened, and we never saw this thing again. I'm 24 now, and I still bring it up sometimes, but no one really wants to talk about it. Priscilla Lovell, Casper, Wyoming. That sounds a little frustrating, but I have a fondness for orb stories. I'm not so sure that they're even paranormal in nature. The stories I've read and heard suggest that these are living creatures that are both sentient and quite common. I've even heard of lost time associated with them, so there is documentation that support your claims. Thank you for sharing your story, Priscilla. Our last story for this time was sent in anonymously. I'm not sure if this was intentional or the person just didn't complete the form. If you are the author of this one, please let me know so that I can give you proper credit. Here is the story, Mary and the Verge. I'm fairly skeptical, so the spookiest thing about this for me was how we all remember the same thing. I went to a Catholic school. You know, uniforms, prayers, liturgies, you get the idea. Across the road next to the river, there was a Catholic college called St. Paul's. The college had a campus that included an acre of forest. It was small, but still a pocket of dense, tall trees. In the middle of this forest were 2 picnic tables and a full-size statue of the Virgin Mary. We fondly called this spot the Verge. I was 17 years old at the time. After schools, Fridays, and on Saturdays, we met at the Verge. Sometimes all we did was hang out. Other times there were some refreshments, code name for booze. My best friend and I lived closest to the Verge, so we spent a lot of time there. One night, there was a large crowd. When some of the cool girls showed up, one of the girls was questioning the morality of drinking in front of the Virgin Mary. This was a Catholic high school, remember? I went on a long rant about this and about Catholic priests, corruption, etc. Then I had a moment of teenage brilliance, and I asked for a sign. I said,
"If God objects, may he show us a sign."
Within a heartbeat of my words, thunder cracked and rain came down very hard. Very hard. Within 30 seconds later, 2 cop cars pulled up just beyond the trees. Here we were, standing there in the woods, rain crashing down, lights flashing, thunder rumbling, and of course, a lot of underage drinking. Needless to say, everyone scattered. I've told this story a few times now. It's a real crowd pleaser. I guess I gotta say, I always felt like I was remembering an embellished account of what happened. It seemed like I couldn't trust my own memory. During the lockdown, this year, 2020, we had a Zoom high school reunion. I asked everyone there about it. We hadn't spoken in a decade, and I wanted to know if I was remembering it right. To a man, everyone remembered it exactly as I did. Sent in anonymously from places unknown. I have to say I love this story. It's not scary, not paranormal, and extremely illegal, but it does sound like fun. The things we do when we are young. Now, did the Virgin Mary interrupt your party? Who can say? Thank you for sharing your story, and please do send me your name and location. Well, that's it for our stories this week. I want to thank everyone that shared a story this time. There were some pretty darn good stories this week. If you want to share your story, it's easy to do. Just head to ronsamazingstories.com, click on the Stories Submission banner, and fill out the form. That's all it takes to make your story our story. Our featured story this time is a classic from the pen of Virginia Woolf. Some might consider this tale a fluff piece and nothing more. It is a short tale, only about 6 minutes long, but its beauty comes from what it doesn't say. Listen carefully and I think you'll get it. It is titled A Haunted House, and it is read for us by David Feterman.
A Haunted House by Virginia Woolf. Whatever hour you woke, there was a door shutting. From room to room they went hand in hand, lifting here, opening there, making sure. A ghostly couple. "Here we left it," she said, and he added, "Oh, but here too. It's upstairs," she murmured, and in the garden, he whispered. "Quietly," they said, "or we shall wake them." But it wasn't that you woke us. Oh no. They're looking for it. They're drawing the curtain, one might say, and so read on a page or two. Now they've found it. One would be certain, stopping the pencil on the margin. And then, tired of reading, one might rise and see for oneself the house all empty, the door standing open, only the wood pigeons bubbling with content, and the hum of the threshing machine sounding from the farm. What did I come in here for? What did I want to find? My hands were empty. Perhaps it's upstairs then. The apples were in the loft, and so down again in the garden still as ever, only the book had slipped into the grass. But they had found it in the drawing room. Not that one could ever see them. The window panes reflected apples, reflected roses. All the leaves were green in the glass. If they moved in the drawing room, the apple only turned its yellow side. Yet the moment after, if the door was opened, spread about the floor, hung upon the walls, pendant from the ceiling. What? My hands were empty. The shadow of a thrush crossed the carpet. From the deepest wells of silence, the wood pigeon drew its bubble of sound. Safe, safe, safe. The pulse of the house beat softly. The treasure buried, the room. The pulse stopped short. Oh, was that the buried treasure? A moment later the light had faded. Out in the garden, then. But the trees spun darkness for a wandering beam of sun so fine, so rare, so coolly sunk beneath the surface the beam I sought, always burning behind the glass. Death was the glass. Death was between us, coming to the woman first, hundreds of years ago, leaving the house, sealing all the windows. The rooms were darkened. He left it, left her, went north, went east, saw the stars turned in the southern sky, sought the house, found it dropped beneath the downs. Safe, safe, safe. The pulse of the house beat gladly. The treasure yours. The wind roars up the avenue. Trees stoop and bend this way and that. Moonbeams splash and spill wildly in the rain. But the beam of the lamp falls straight from the window. The candle burns stiff and still, wandering through the house, opening the windows, whispering not to wake us. The ghostly couple seek their joy. Here we slept, she says, and he adds, kisses without number, waking in the morning, silver between the trees, upstairs in the garden, when summer came, in winter snow time. The doors go shutting far in the distance, gently knocking like the pulse of a heart. Nearer they come, cease at the doorway. The wind falls, the rain slides silver down the glass. Our eyes darken. We hear no steps beside us. We see no lady spread her ghostly cloak. His hands shield the lantern. Look, he breathes. Sound asleep, love upon their lips. Stooping, holding their silver lamp above us, long they look, and deeply. Long they pause. The wind drives straightly, the flame stoops slightly. Wild beams of moonlight cross both floor and wall, and, meeting, stain the faces bent, the faces pondering, the faces that search the sleepers and seek their hidden joy. Safe, safe, safe. The heart of the house beats proudly. Long years, he sighs. Again you found me. Here, she murmurs, sleeping in the garden reading, laughing, rolling apples in the loft. Here we left our treasure. Stooping, their light lifts the lids upon my eyes. Safe, safe, safe. Safe, safe, safe. The pulse of the house beats wildly. Waking, I cry, "Oh, is this your buried treasure?" The light in the heart.
Quite dreamy and surreal, don't you think? A Haunted House was first published in 1921 as part of Virginia Woolf's short story collection, Monday or Tuesday. The collection, which contained 8 short stories, was meant to emphasize Woolf's philosophies surrounding modernist literature. Woolf believed that writers should focus less on trying to please sales-oriented publishers and the fickle public, and instead write what inspired them. In her view, literature should focus on the mysteries and complexities of life, rather than the material components. A Haunted House explores this philosophy by turning what initially appears to be a straightforward ghost story into her deep thoughts on the nature of love, memory, life, and of course, death. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's quite different from what we normally play at Halloween and on Ron's Amazing Stories.
Johnny, is this true?
As you know by now, I like to surf the internet to find the strange and unusual. I do this in the name of the podcast, but the truth is, I would do it anyway, even if there was no podcast. What you're about to hear is...
Johnny, is this true?
I will tell you a story and then ask the question, did I make it up or is it true? Your job is to decide. Let's get started.
Johnny, is this true?
This time on Johnny, Is It True? We have a real game of true or false. I will read you a fact about Halloween, and it's your job to decide if I created it or it's historically correct. A word of warning, at least one of these statements is about as real as a pumpkin head. Let's get started. Fact number 1. Originally, you had to dance for your treat. Is this true or is it false? This one's true. You can trace trick-or-treating to the European practice of mumming or guising, in which costume-wearing participants would go door to door performing choreographed dances, songs, and plays in exchange for treats. In some early version of trick-or-treating, men paraded door to door, and boys often followed, begging for coins. Most of these early trick-or-treaters were poor and actually needed the money. But wealthy children also joined in the fun. Door-to-door begging was mostly stopped in the 1930s, but re-emerged later in the century to distract kids from pulling Halloween pranks. Fact number 2. Jack-o'-lanterns were once made out of turnips, beets, and potatoes. Not pumpkins. Now I must be mad. This has to be false. Or is it? Again, this one is true. The jack-o'-lantern comes from an old Irish tale about a man named Stingy Jack. According to folklore, Stingy Jack was out getting sloshed with the devil when Jack convinced his drinking partner to turn himself into a coin to pay for the drinks without spending money. Jack then put the devil, shaped like a coin, into his pocket, which also contained a silver cross that kept the devil from transforming back. Jack promised to free the devil as long as the devil wouldn't bother him for a year, and that if he died, the devil could never claim his soul. Jack tricked the devil again later, getting him to pick a piece of fruit out of the tree and then carving a cross into the bark when the devil was in the branches. This trick bought Jack another 10 years of devil-free living. When Jack finally died, God decided he wasn't fit for heaven, but the devil had promised never to claim his soul for hell. So Jack was sent off to roam the earth with only a burning coal for light. He put the coal into a turnip as a lantern, and Stingy Jack became Jack of the Lantern, or Jack-o'-lantern. Based on this myth, the Irish carved scary faces into turnips, beets, and potatoes to scare away Stingy Jack and any other spirits of the night. How about that? Fact number 3. Studies have shown that trick-or-treating actually tames wild children and promotes good behavior. How very nice, don't you think? Absolutely not, and so very wrong. Studies have shown nothing of the kind. In fact, putting costume-wearing kids into groups and introducing a clear object of desire, such as candy, has been shown to lead to de-individualization. This psychological term explains what happens when a group of maturing young minds begin to care less about the consequences of their individual actions, leading them to do things that they might not do alone. One study in particular found that unsupervised costume children in groups were far more likely to steal candy and money than non-costume kids or kids not in a group. Another similar study found that masked children were significantly more likely to take more Halloween candy than they were supposed to. Like I've always said, you can never trust a monster. Fact number 4. Our last fact is quite simple. In a few American towns, Halloween was originally referred to as Cabbage Night. Is that right? It is. This came from a Scottish fortune-telling game where girls used cabbage stumps to predict information about their future husbands. In early Farmingham, Massachusetts, teens skipped the fortune-telling and simply went around throwing cabbage at their neighbors' houses. And this was no isolated tradition. In the late 19th century America, country boys reportedly rejoiced in throwing cabbage, corn, and assorted rotten vegetables at anything that moved. Well, that is it for our Halloween edition of Johnny Is It True? I hope you found it interesting, or at least entertaining. Do you have any strange but true stories you want to share? If you do, send them to ronsamazingstories@gmail.com, and I'll use them if I can.
As read by. Amazing stories read by amazing people.
This time on As Read By, we have something pretty special. Every once in a while, a listener sends in an original fiction story. These mean the world to me, and they deserve special treatment. So that's when I turn to my friend, who is a narrator by profession, to read them. What we have is a classic Halloween story written by Berklie Apedaile from Smithfield, Utah. Berklie says that she is a creative writer and hopes to write more stories for the show. It's my hope that she does. The story she has written for us today is titled Date Night Fright, and it is read for us by our very good friend, Mark Nelson.
Why are we here? Lizzie whispered. It's just for a bit of fun, you'll see, Jack answered. I went to go back. Thunder crackled overhead. We're almost there. Don't chicken out now. Jack, please, let's go back. I'm scared. Lizzie grabbed his arm and tugged him to a stop. This was a bad idea. I want to go home. It's just a house, Lizzie. I really don't feel good about it, Jack. Please take me home. There was a click, and then a beam shone up the drive. Jack flipped the flashlight around into Lizzie's face. "What do you see to be scared of? The old Johnson home has been empty for years." The house towered before them, dark and daunting against the gray storm clouds obscuring the moon. It had been 15 years since the Johnson family had mysteriously disappeared after their daughter, Eliza, drowned in the pond behind the house. Lizzie's dark brown hair blew across her face in the breeze, and thunder rumbled overhead. Jack's eyes were penetrating as he waited for her answer. She took a deep breath and then reached for his hand. "Fine, let's go. That's my girl." He dropped the beam towards the ground as they approached the front porch. Boards creaked under their feet as he reached forward and jiggled the doorknob. The door swung inwards, revealing a cobweb-covered, dusty entryway. Lizzie squeezed Jack's hand as they crept across the door jamb and into the living area. She gasped when she saw the furniture. The ground was littered with crystal shards from the fallen, rusted chandelier. The couches were shredded as if some feral animal had raged through the house. Bricks and dust tumbled from the wall where a fireplace once sat. Jack chuckled nervously. "Badgers must have gotten in. Nothing to worry about." He sounded calm, but his hand squeezed hers tightly as they proceeded through to the kitchen. A similar sight met them when the beam swept across the cupboards and appliances. Doors hung precariously from twisted hinges. Glass had blown from the oven and microwave. Linoleum clung to the ground in tattered shreds, and mold spilled from the open fridge. Cobwebs hung thickly in the windows and across the pantry's entrance, where they could smell more mold and spoiled food. Glass crunched underfoot as they retreated back into the living area and towards the hall. "Must have been one heck of a party," Jack whispered. His grip on Lizzie's hand was relaxing a little, but she clung tighter as they progressed towards the stairs. "Haven't you had enough yet?" she asked. "They say Eliza came back and tormented her parents after she died. That's why they disappeared. What if she's still here?" "That's nonsense. They probably just moved. Let's check just one more room," Jack said, pulling her onwards. The stairs were rotting and sagging. The carpet was threadbare in some places, and Lizzie could feel her foot sink near the top of the stairs. The upstairs windows must have been broken because the crisp autumn breeze clawed at their jackets as they tiptoed forward. Jack carefully swept the flashlight towards each door as they made their way past. They had almost reached the end of the hall, and Jack was reaching for the last door, when a blood-curdling scream tore through the silence. Lizzie whipped around, shoving Jack in front of her, and closed her eyes tight. A pale, ghostly woman with wispy black hair stood at the head of the stairs in a flowing white gown. Her hands were raised to her veiled face as she continued to shriek. The flashlight crashed to the floor as Jack stumbled backwards into Lizzie, and they both fell back into the wall. The woman stopped screaming and cocked her head to one side, stretching an arm towards Jack and crooking a finger.
"Who dares disturb our slumber?"
Another voice rasped. Lizzie peeked through her fingers. Jack had her pinned in the hallway corner, but she could see the woman at the stairs, and a new figure emerged from the doorway Jack had been about to open. It was large and hulking, shrouded in shadows. Lizzie clung to Jack and cowered further into the corner as the two figures approached. "I told you," she moaned. "I told you." Jack's mouth hung open in speechless horror. A rare moonbeam slipped through the broken window and revealed more figures emerging from the other rooms. They shuffled and dragged as they surrounded the corner. Their voices rasped and their cackles froze him where he stood. The ghostly woman reached forward as if to grab him, and at last he was able to move. He ducked and tore away from Lizzie's grip, rolling as he swiped the flashlight, and tumbled to his feet just outside the reach of a humped old lady waving a cane at him. He barely glanced at her distorted, wrinkly face before racing for the stairs. He heard Lizzie scream his name, but he jumped the remaining stairs and made for the door. Lizzie cowered in her corner until Jack was out of sight, then stood and met the eyes of the ghouls. They each put a finger to their lips and crept down the stairs with Lizzie to peer through the front door. They could all see the flashlight beam waving wildly down the slanted driveway, and then saw headlights spring into life. The motor roared, and Jack's truck peeled away with the sound of screeching rubber. Lizzie looked to the ghouls and then bent double, laughing. One by one, masks were pulled free, veils dropped away, and props were tossed to the side. Lizzie's friends from the drama club all broke out into giggles and fits of laughter. They slapped high fives and exchanged excited congratulations with each other. Nobody noticed as an extra shadow entered the room. "Did you see his face?" Brienne giggled. "Couldn't have timed it better," Zach agreed. "You are such a good actress," JC said. "He'll never forgive me," Lizzie gasped. "I can't believe you convinced him this would be a great place for a date, Zach." As the laughter died away, a cold chill settled in the room. The shadows seemed to deepen as phone flashlights lit up and the party gathered up their things. They made for the door, still celebrating their success, when a cold hand fell on Lizzie's shoulder. She turned and faced the pale face of an unfamiliar, gray-eyed girl. "Who?" she started, then froze. "My turn." Eliza Johnson giggled as the front door slammed shut, trapping everyone. Lightning flashed outside the window, lighting up the pale girl's face. She had only been 14 when she drowned. Blue veins stood out starkly against her paper-thin skin, and her mousy brown hair hung in stringy clumps. Her clothes were stiff and wrinkled. The girl grinned and gripped Lizzie's wrist in her own bony fingers. "Eliza wants to play too."
What a well-written story. To Berklie, I say thank you for sharing this with us. The twist at the end was something I didn't see coming. It was both creepy and fun. What a perfect Halloween story. I do have to wonder if there's a part 2 coming. After all, Eliza Johnson just wanted to have some fun. Thank you again, Berklie. Also, I want to thank Mark Nelson. Mark did the narration for our story, and I think he did a pretty fantastic job. Mark has recorded more than 70 professional audiobooks, including crime fiction, science fiction, horror, and classics for Audible. He has also done over 150 recordings for LibriVox.org, which is truly amazing. You can find out more about Mark and his work at markdouglasnelson.com. If you have a work of fiction that you want to share with us, please do. You can use the Story Submission tab on the main website. The links for this are in the show notes.
Not so important times in history.
In this segment, we take a look at historical events that may otherwise go unnoticed. We look at history with a fish-eyed lens, giving a perspective that should provide no insight to anyone or any time. But it is historical, or hysterical, as the case may be. Join us now for this event in history. In the late 1800s, New England was in the midst of a vampire fad, but it was nothing like the Twilight vampires of today. No, these New England vampire scares were a bit too real. Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Vermont were all suffering from outbreaks of tuberculosis called consumption at the time. The cause was unknown, although people knew that once a family member got the disease, others were soon to follow. The popular theory of the time was that the first infected member of a family was draining the life force from their relatives, functioning as sort of a living dead. Those who died from consumption were exhumed and examined. If their body seemed too fresh, it was assumed to still be feeding on the living. There were a number of ways to stop this vampiric feeding. The simplest and least gruesome was turning the body over in its grave so that it faced towards the earth. Others would burn the organs of the body. Sometimes this was combined with decapitating it. Some believed that inhaling the smoke and ash from the burned organs would cure their tuberculosis. Mercy Brown was perhaps the most infamous case of this. She passed away from tuberculosis on July 17, 1892. Her family did not agree that vampires were to blame for consumption and did not want her body exhumed. However, when the other villagers insisted, her father capitulated, wisely noting his neighbor's mob mentality. When Mercy was dug up, her body showed signs of fresh blood. It had also turned over, seemingly by itself, in its grave. The villagers panicked and burned her corpse. They preserved the ashes from her heart and mixed them with water. Then they forced Mercy's brother, who was currently suffering from consumption, to drink those ashes. Although the villagers thought that this would cure his illness, Brother Edwin died 2 months later. The Mercy Brown incident was the inspiration for the Caitlin Kierman's short story, So Runs the World Away. It has also been suggested by scholars that Bram Stoker, the author of the novel Dracula, knew about the Mercy Brown case through newspaper articles and based the novel's character, Lucy Westenara, upon her. Of course, today we know of the viciousness and viral spread of tuberculosis, and that vampires did not cause the outbreaks in New England. But the story of the vampire has continued to grow and is even more popular than ever. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Not So Important Times in History. It was brought to you by Gladys Goodies, great treats for your dog to eat. Now, Gladys Goodies has just introduced their newest treat. Little Bits liver sticks are a great source of vitamins for your pet. These treats are great for cats and dogs alike. They are made from 100% beef liver. Liver is a nutrient-rich organ that most pets love eating. You can get these treats and some really cool swag for your dog or cat at GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our promo code, RONS, to get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That website again is GladysGoodies.com. That was episode number 462, and we the people want to thank Parker Happ, Margie Wells, Priscilla Lovell, Berklie Apedaile, and Mark Nelson. Truly amazing people. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.